Hey guys, welcome to section 3 of this video tutorial series on Django. In this section, we're going to build our index template. So the whole idea with this template is we're going to build everything out in terms of what a user sees when they visit the home page. So we're going to check if the user's logged in. We're going to display a different message depending on whether or not they're logged in. And we'll show them a quick list of games. Specifically, we'll show them like 10 of their games, their most recent games, by sorting from an inverted date. And I'll show you guys how to do that. It's actually relatively simple. But we'll take the top 10 games and we'll display them. If there are no games, we'll say, hey, there are no games. If the user is not logged in, we'll say, hey, welcome to our app. Would you like to register or log in? So we'll go ahead and get started on that. And of course, we're going to use the user is authenticated. So let's come on over here to our project file. Now, in order to add a view, you are going to start out here in the views.python file. You can see we already have home here built by default. This is pretty much all crap. We'll keep the assert is instance just to make sure it's a valid HTTP request. But the biggest differential we want to make in home view is if the user is authenticated. So we'll go if request dot, yeah, that's right, request.user dot is authenticated, colon, enter. So we'll do this in a try catch. So we'll do try games equals game dot, but before we do this, we need to import our models. Remember from the other section, we built our models out. So we're going to go from .models, and what this does is this gets you your models.python file. So anything that starts with a dot is grabbing that record, and it's grabbing that actual file in your database, as opposed to Django.htp. That's like grabbing something from the Django framework. So let's go ahead and do from .models. We're going to import store, game, and user info as such. Because remember, we created these three models in the last lesson, so we're going to need to import them in order to have access to them. So for Django requests to the database, we use the model, and then we go .objects. Right? Now, this is kind of like the Django equivalent of a DB context, for instance. If we're working in Entity Framework, this is like our DB context, but in Python. So game.objects, and we're going to use a .filter. And we're going to go ahead and go game underscore user underscore info underscore ID equals request.user.id. So what is this? What is this line of code here? Well, this filter it's exactly what it says. It's a filter. We pass what we're filtering by here with this equal statement, and then we go ahead and we grab our records. So it's relatively simple. Let's go ahead and take a look. If we can open up the DB SQLite, we can take a look and confirm that that is the correct field name, which is why I mentioned that you guys should get DB Browser for SQLite so you can double check on your own. So let's go ahead and open this bad boy up. Because what we're doing here is we're trying to get a list of the user's games. So if they are logged in and they have user records and they have game records, we should be able to see those. Of course, we have to assign the user info to their user class before that becomes available, but I'll show you how to do that as well. So, game user info ID. Is that the correct field on the games thing? Okay, game underscore user underscore info underscore ID. So we can see that yes, that is in fact the correct field name to be filtering across. So game like this, boom, 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 done. However, if you remember, we only want to get the top 10 records, and we want to order it inversely by the date, so descending. So the most recent ones first, the oldest ones last. You can do it descending as well. You can do the oldest ones first. But it seems like the more recent games would be the more relevant one for any user that's logging in. So we'll do an inverse order by. So check this out, order underscore by. As such. So what this does is it grabs the date property, but with this prefix in front of it, it reverses it. And then we'll finish off with a slice here. And this little syntax here actually slices the records, meaning it takes only the top 10. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with slices and with orders and filters. Python has a whole framework for this stuff, and it's pretty cool, especially if you import some really fancy libraries like pandas and matplotlib and that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and check and see if we have games. If len games greater than 0. Sorry, I'm going back to C# with my weird parentheses in my conditional statements. I apologize, guys. So if len games greater than 0, what is this doing? It's checking to make sure that there is something in games. Meaning this len operator here checks the length. This is everywhere in Python. So it returns the number of items in a container. So if it's greater than 0, that means the user has games. So what do we want to do? We want to render that request with those games. Otherwise, we want to render it as none. So we'll go ahead and if the user has games, we'll go return render request, and then we'll give obviously the URL of our template, which is app/index.html, and you can see that right here. Index.html right there. Boom. And then we're going to pass this called a context. A context is like a dictionary. So we create it with that right there. And the context, what we're going to do is we're going to pass games in, and we're going to give it the key games. So we're going to go like this: games, games, like so. This is your context object. This is how I like to set up excuse me. This is how I like to set up my views handling as far as the context is concerned and as far as the rendering of the request is concerned. So this will give this games object that we requested over to the Python view so it can grab those records. And then let's see, we can also come down here and we can go return render request app-index.html. Sorry about that. .html. None. Sorry, no, we'll do it differently. We will pass a context object. Games. None. As such. Now, what does this do? This, if we do not pass, if we hit this line, we're out of the current execution. So we don't have to worry about what happens after that if we hit this line. If we move past it and we go to this line where it says return render, we have to pass something. So we'll go ahead and do it that way. If there are no games, we'll return this. Now we're going to do the catch, or sorry, the except. Again, I'm going back to C#. Sorry about that. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll just take this. And this is if we get an error in our database. We'll just say, or rendering the view or something. We'll just say, well, if we can't load it, we'll go into the except and we'll just return none. So that's what we'll do. And then finally, we'll have our final case here. If we make it through everything else, and if the user is not authenticated because we're exiting this indented block, we'll go return render request app/index.html, and we will not pass a games object because there's no reason to, because we don't have any games to load. We're not even authenticated. We shouldn't be able to see any games because we should only be able to see the games if logged in, right? So that, in a nutshell, is the views. So this gives you a good idea of how to authenticate, how to filter, get the most recent date, get 10 of them so we can see the last 10 games that we did, and then how to render the view. There's probably some improvements we could make on this, but I think this is good for just starting out and just kind of working with the Django framework a little bit. So now that we got views.py done, let's come over here into this folder, Django Scorekeeper app, and let's go into urls.py and let's register that. So every URL has to be registered here. This is where we keep our routes. So the Django knows what the heck you're doing when you submit a certain request. So, well, actually, no, we're working on index here. Never mind. Never mind, we're working on index. My bad. It's already registered. The home is already registered here. So views.home, we're good. We're good. We don't need it. All right, so moving on. Let's actually create the template file. So if we go into templates and we go into app, we're gonna go ahead and go over to the index file, and you can see this is the .NET Visual Studio automatically generated stuff that they have from the Visual Studio Python tool. It's just garbage. It's just garbage. We can delete all this. And just put our own custom stuff in here. It doesn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, you know, you're going to need to put something custom in here. We will keep this layout HTML because what this line up here does is it extends the layout.html file, so we keep that header, footer, color, CSS files, everything like that. If we remove this, then we get like a blank page. So you don't want to remove that. And then the block content. If we go into layout.html, we can see, let me see. Yep, that corresponds with this block right here. So that's how we extend our layouts. This is the content block. You know, in MVC, this would be render body, I believe, is the corresponding method we would be using there. So let's go ahead and get to work. So this is the index. So remember what we talked about before. We need to make sure that the user is authenticated. And if so, display one thing. If not, display something totally different, right? So this whole thing needs to be in a big block here. If user.is authenticated. Else, and if. Like so, right? Because you have to really make that primary consideration if you're saving records according to users. So this else block, this is easy. So let's do this one first. We're going to go h2 welcome to Django scorekeeper. You are not logged in. Please log in to begin creating your scores or register a new account. And then we'll come down here and we'll go href equals dash login. And then we'll add a class equals button primary, button large. These are Bootstrap classes, by the way. You use them all the time. When you add these classes, it just adds some nice markup so it looks like a button rather than just looking like a hyperlink. So log in here. Log in. Like so. And then that'll be the end if. That's the simple one, right? That's the simple one. The complicated one is going to be here in our is user authenticated. That's where it's going to get kind of dicey and kind of weird. Because of course we can't just throw whatever crap we want in there. We have to check to see if we got games, and we have to display a list of those games, and then also probably a few other things too in there. So we'll go through and we'll do that right now. So we're going to use the Bootstrap Framework. So we'll start off with a row, and then we'll add a call MD12 as such. That's pretty good. And then we'll do an H2, which is the second largest of the headers. And we'll go welcome back. And check this out. User.get username. So what is that? that is a built-in thing that you can do in Django to get user information. There should be a few other things you can do with this. So user.getUsername will just get the current username. So in this case, if we're logged in as super user, we'll say super user or whatever. So that's that. And then we'll have another div class equals col md12. And this is just a full width column with medium width screen for this class. And we'll go h2 games. And we'll put a little HR class in here, which is kind of like a little separator, a little line to delineate one section from another. And then this is where we're going to get fancy with our Django. This is going to display every single time. Excuse me. Here we're going to go ahead and we're going to say the following. We're going to go into our Django. If games is not none. Excuse me. Else. Sorry about that. And if. It's important to format these really clearly so that you can read them clearly. Visual Studio, I guess, doesn't have built-in support to kind of open and close these conditional statements like you do in the Razor view. So it can get a little dicey editing these. I'm not sure if Visual Studio Code does it better. Maybe PyCharm would be one that we kind of see the conditional hierarchy here. But it's relatively simple. So if games is not none, let's create a new row and let's start creating some columns. So within this row, we'll go ahead and say the following. We need a for loop. So in order to get a for loop in Python in the template, you have to do like for x in games, because we call it games, so we'll go ahead and just call it for x in games. For game in games. For game in games. That makes a little bit more sense. And then we'll go down here and we'll go end for. All right. And then we'll do div class equals col md12 for a full width column. And you can make this half width if you want, or whatever you want to do. But we'll just make it a full width for now. And then we'll go ahead and just put the h4, and in here we'll go game.name, because I believe if we go into our models, we can double check and make sure that's the correct field. And yes, it does look like there is a field called game name, which is great. And then here we're going to do href equals view game slash game.id. Check that out. So what is that? That is a little bit of Python code we're using to generate the link to view the game. Now, of course, I am not, there is a URL handler in Python, but I'm trying to make this simple for beginners and easy. So I just decided to add the ID onto the view game route. This will make it easier, and you can kind of go and just get to work with this. You obviously can use the URL dispatcher, and that's probably a bit more of a best practice. But I think for the sake of getting through this one relatively quickly and relatively clearly, I think that we're in good shape doing it like this. And then finally, at the end of this big list of games, what do we want to do here? After we get out of the for loop, so we're still in the if games is not none. So let's put a little separator here. Let's make another row. Like so. That looks good. Okay. Div class equals col md12. And we'll do an href equals create game. And we'll add a class here. As such. And what this will do, this will just display the ability to create a game. That's all it is. It's just a link to the game itself. Well, actually, no. We're going to put this at the end of both, outside of the end if. We're going to put this down here because this is going to display regardless, because we need to have that be a part of everything. So we're going to display this regardless. What we are going to display here, right after this for loop, is going to be the view all games. So, which we will create that in the following lessons. So ref equals slash. If you don't understand what we're doing here, beef up on your HTML, CSS, JavaScript a little bit, because all we're doing is we're just creating links and creating buttons. And you'll be able to see what this looks like on the back end. You always have to know some HTML, CSS in order to work with web apps. So if you don't know what's going on, let's take a look at the page and see what we have so far. And it should be in pretty good shape. I think this covers everything that we want it to do. What we should have thus far is a web app where when we log in, we see everything in terms of, so let me bring it over here so you guys can see. We see everything if we're logged in. So now it's saying you're not logged in. So that's correct. We are in fact not logged in. So what did we make this here? Super user, I think it was water123. Okay, so we have an exception. Let's see what the exception is. Template does not exist at dash. Huh. Interesting. So, I think I know how to fix this. First of all, that's a typo as such. Let's try refreshing and see if that fixes it. No, that doesn't fix it either. All right, let's keep looking for more solutions. Let's see, app. What is a common solution to this problem? Stand by. Stand by. I believe this is a settings issue. So let me double check the settings and see. Interesting. Oh, here we go. Found it. There it is. Sorry about that, guys. So let's go ahead and restart our web service here. You don't want the app, the dash in front of the app. That was the mistake. That was what got me. So now if you come over here, we can see we're logged in. We're not getting that weird error. And we can see games, but we did forget to add a message that says you have no games. That's something we need to have it say, right? So let's go back here and triple check our code. Let's see. So remember, we have this big if else, which is if user is authenticated, and then if games is not none, and then else we need to put something in here. Let's see. Let's just go ahead and grab this. So we can grab the column, we'll copy paste this as such, and then in here we will say you have not created any games yet. So let's put that in there and let's refresh. And then if you come over here, you can see, yep, we're registered, we're logged in, but we have not created any games yet. So that looks great to me. We're going to extend this in the coming videos, but I think we're in a great place to get started. So I'll check you guys out in the next video, but I think that looks pretty good for now. Thanks for watching.